When someone is very self-seeking, well, it's plain as the nose on their face. When someone is selfish, that's easy enough to spot. When someone keeps records of wrongs, we know it. Yep, you're bitter. I can see that. It's obvious. Those are things that we see in them. Also, Galatians chapter 5, if you want to turn there, there's a whole list of different things that we can see in other people. When they're not walking in the light, when there's a manifestation of the flesh and sin in their lives, we see it clear enough. Verse 16 through 19, Paul identifies this. He says, verse 19, he says, the works of the flesh are evident. What does that mean, are evident? It means you can see them clearly. This is not a mystery. You can see, they're very easy to see. The works of the flesh are evident. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, things like these. Those are easy to see. And a third of those, at least a half of those are relational. Fits of rage, envy, dissensions, factions. We can see it when a person is walking in bitterness and they're just cantankerous and obnoxious and rude and not loving. And it's very easy. It's evident. It's evident. That's what Paul says. So that's the speck. And that's always the easiest part, seeing their problem. Well, you know what your problem is? Well, you know what your problem is? You know what your problem is? That's easy, to point out someone else's problem. But there's a prerequisite before we do that. What's the prerequisite? First of all, take the log out of your own eye. Deal with the log. He says, why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that's in your own eye? You see, there's the problem. It's always easiest to see and identify other people's faults, but when it comes to our own sins, we tend to be completely blind to them. We expect grace from other people, and we judge them by their actions. We expect grace and judge them by their actions. But when it comes to our own personal walk, we often fail to give grace, and we expect them to judge us by our intentions, which they cannot see. So because they cannot see our intentions, but they only see our actions, they see clearly our sin, but we excuse it because we're not allowing the light to penetrate beyond the surface. We're not allowing the heart of the law to expose our motives. The log. What does he mean by the log? Notice the difference in description. Why do you see the speck? The word that's translated speck, it means a very fine particle, like a piece of dust, or it's almost so small that you can't even see it. And then he contrasts that with the log that's in your own eye. The word that's translated log can be translated beam or rafter. It's huge. It's huge. This is not an accident. Jesus doesn't choose the word translated speck and the word translated log arbitrarily. He means to compare and to contrast. Yes, what they have in their eye, it's real, it's there, you can identify it, and it's tangible. It's something tangible. And what you have in your own eye, which you're totally blind to, it's also tangible, but it's actually worse. It's actually worse than the speck that you can see clearly. The thing that you're blind to in your own eye, in your own heart, in your own life, you're blind to, but it's actually of a magnitude that's greater than theirs. Not in terms of absolute sin. You say, well, I thought all sin was the same in the eyes of God. Yes, it is. But here's the deal. Someone else's sin does not cause you to walk in the darkness, nor can it ever. At any time. No one else's sin can ever cause you to walk in darkness. It's not possible. Only our sin can hinder us from walking in the light. That's why it's a log. My sin is way more dangerous to me than anyone else's sins against me. You follow me? Your sin can't really hurt me spiritually. My sin can cripple me. You see the difference between the log and the speck? Their unloving attitudes and actions towards you cannot cripple you spiritually. It's not possible. Not at all. It can't cause you to not bear fruit. Can't cause you to walk in darkness. It can't cause you to spiritually spiral down to the abyss. Can't cause you to leave your spouse. Can't cause you to develop addictions. Can't cause you to be foolish with your spending. Can't cause any of those things. However, an unforeseen log or fault or sin that I will not allow myself to see in my own heart can destroy my marriage, can destroy my relationships, and can destroy and make sure that I am barren and bear no fruit whatsoever. That's the difference between the speck and the log. Their speck is not unimagined. I'm not excusing their speck. That's not, and nor is Jesus. Jesus is not saying their speck is not important. But your log is the important thing. Their speck isn't sin, but your log, tisk, 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 sin, sin, sin. That's not what he's saying. Both of these things are legitimate faults, but their speck cannot cripple you. But the log in your eye, it can and it will. It can and it will. So what is the log? Well, sometimes we know exactly what planks we carry around in our own eyes. You often hear people say, I have issues with anger. They're clearly aware that they have beams sticking out of the sides of their head, and when they turn, they tend to hit people with them because they stick out 3 or 4 feet and whack, whack. And they say, yeah, I got anger issues. They're aware of them, unwilling to deal with them, but they pass it off as part of their personality, pass it off as part of their disposition, and therefore they don't deal with them. They don't take them out. They just simply acknowledge them. Yes, that's an issue of mine, anger. Therefore, don't cross me, or you will feel the wrath and fury of my beam as it flies out of my eye and hits you in the skull. So sometimes people are aware of the planks, and sometimes we're blind, and we cannot see them. The book Calvary Road is particularly useful and illuminating on this particular passage in Scripture. Roy Hession points out something that I don't think I ever thought of until I read his book Calvary Road back in 1997 or 98, and that is this. The log in our eye is often our response to the speck in their eye. The log in our eye is often our response to a perceived speck in someone else's eye. And you know exactly what this means, or maybe you don't. Let me explain it. Your spouse, they're unloving. They say an unkind word to you, they're rude, they're arrogant, or someone you know relationally, they hurt you in some way. So you go back to last week, you see the speck very clearly in their eye, and then all of a sudden your response to how they have wounded you becomes so huge and so big in the forefront of your mind that it derails your walk spiritually. You become bitter. You become consumed with that person. You cannot really sleep. You can't pray because you're constantly thinking about the offense committed against you. And you're just in an uproar. Maybe you have the self-control to quell the desire to just become the Incredible Hulk, but nonetheless, inside you're eaten up by that, and you're spiritually just floundering. Why? Because they were mean to you. And therein lies the log. Now the question is, did their